My name is Amelia Evans. I'm 29 years old, and for most of my life, I believed that if you showed up consistently, treated people with respect, and built something real, one brick at a time, things would eventually work out. I didn't grow up around flash. My dad was a union electrician. My mom ran a daycare out of our house for 20 years. Stability mattered more than appearances. That mindset followed me into adulthood, into my career as a project manager for a construction company, and, unfortunately, into my relationship with Nathan Miller. Nathan and I had been together for 14 months. He was 27, a dental hygienist, kind in a soft, non-confrontational way. The kind of man who listened more than he spoke. We spent most weekends at each other's places, talked about moving in together, about the future in that careful, hopeful way couples do when they're testing the word without committing to it. Nathan came with baggage. Not the dramatic kind, no addictions, no exes lurking in the shadows, just family. Specifically, his mother. Carol Miller was the kind of woman who peaked early and never emotionally left that era. Cheer captain energy, frozen in time. She cared deeply about optics, who married whom, what cars people drove, what titles followed their names, and no one embodied her lifelong victory lap more than her oldest child. Jessica Miller, Nathan's older sister. Jessica had married Dr. Richard Hale, a cardiologist, 3 years earlier, and from that day forward, every family gathering became a shrine to his greatness. Richard says the economy's about to turn. Richard thinks we should refinance. Richard just got back from another conference. It didn't matter what the topic was. Carol would find a way to circle it back to her son-in-law like he was a medical deity casually walking among civilians. I was polite, I smiled, I listened. Next to Richard's BMW and surgeon salary, my reliable pickup truck and practical career apparently put me one step above asking for spare change. Nathan usually rolled his eyes when we talked privately. He'd say, "You know how my mom is." I believed him. I thought silence meant solidarity. That illusion lasted until the Sunday dinner that ended everything. Carol had invited us over, as she did most weeks. That night, she was especially energized. Richard had received some kind of promotion at the hospital, and Carol practically vibrated with pride. "Jessica," she said, clasping her hands, "you are so lucky. A man with ambition. 60 hours a week, minimum. That's what success looks like." Jessica glowed. Richard smiled modestly. Then Carol turned to Nathan, and then to me. "Honey," she said to her son, voice syrupy but sharp underneath, "you're settling. Look at your sister. She married a doctor, a real professional." Nathan shifted in his chair. I waited, gave him space to speak. Instead, he nodded. "I know," he said lightly, "but she'll do for now." The table went silent. Jessica smirked. Carol nodded, satisfied, like her son had finally learned the script. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not shock, recognition. I took another bite of pot roast, chewed slowly, swallowed. "This is really good, Carol," I said. "Your best yet." Her face lit up. "Thank you, Amelia. It's my grandmother's recipe." I finished my plate, complimented dessert, thanked her for dinner, kissed Nathan on the cheek. "Lovely evening." Then I walked out. I drove home, blocked his number, packed every item he'd left at my place into a box, and went to sleep knowing, deep down, that I had already mourned him at that table. Some lines don't end relationships. They reveal they were never equal to begin with. The first call came an hour after I blocked Nathan's number. I didn't hear it, of course, just saw the missed call notification from an unfamiliar number when I woke up the next morning. Then another and another. By noon, there were 6. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I already knew what they would say. Confusion first, then panic, then the careful rewriting of reality. Instead, I went to work like nothing had happened, reviewed timelines, walked a job site, answered emails. I focused on concrete things, steel, schedules, deliverables, things that didn't bend themselves into lies when pressure was applied. That night, I packed everything Nathan had left at my house. It wasn't dramatic. No sobbing on the floor, no dramatic music playing in the background. Just folded clothes, a toothbrush, the spare hoodie he always claimed he forgot on purpose. I put his spare key on top of the box so I wouldn't forget it. The next morning, I dropped the box at the front desk of his apartment building. "Please let Mr. Miller know this was left for him," I said to the doorman. No note, no explanation. By Tuesday evening, Nathan had escalated. I was unlocking my truck after work when I saw him leaning against the passenger door, hands shoved into his jacket pockets, hair uncombed like he'd been running his fingers through it all day. "Emilia," he said, stepping forward. "What's going on? You blocked my number." I set my bag in the back seat, calm, measured. "Hey, Nathan." "That's it?" His voice cracked. "We've been together over a year. You just disappear?" "I didn't disappear," I said. "I left." "Why?" He looked genuinely distressed, like the answer wasn't obvious. "We had dinner. Everything was fine." I met his eyes. "You said I'd do for now." His face drained of color. "That's not... I didn't mean it like that." "How did you mean it?" I asked. He ran a hand through his hair. "You know my mom. She was doing the Jessica and Richard thing again. I was just trying to get her off my back." "So you handled family pressure by announcing I was temporary." "That's not what I said." "It is literally what you said." He stepped closer. "Please, can we go somewhere and talk about this properly?" "We are talking," I replied. "And what I'm hearing is that when you needed to choose between standing up for me or making your mother comfortable, you chose comfort." "That's not fair." "It's accurate." He reached for my arm. I stepped back. "I don't want anyone else," he said quickly. "I never did." "You wanted someone else Sunday night," I said. "What changed?" He opened his mouth. Closed it. I nodded. "Right." I got in my truck and drove away, hands steady on the wheel, heart loud but certain. Over the next week, I blocked 4 more numbers. It was almost impressive. How many friends are willing to lend you their phone when someone's panicking over a relationship they didn't protect? Then came Jessica. I was having lunch at a small sandwich place near my office when she walked in, scanned the room, and headed straight for my table like she'd been hoping to find me. "Emilia," she said, "we need to talk." "Do we?" She sat anyway. "Nathan is a mess. You're being unreasonable." I took a sip of my drink. "How's Dr. Hale?" She frowned. "Don't change the subject." "Your brother told your family I was temporary while I was sitting there," I said evenly. "What part of that sounds like a misunderstanding?" "He was under pressure," she insisted. "Mom was doing her comparison thing. So he threw me under the bus to make Mommy happy." She winced. "That's not fair." "He didn't defend me," I said. "He agreed with her." Jessica folded her arms. "Nicole, I mean, you. He really cares about you." "He really cares about having a girlfriend," I replied. "Which girlfriend seems flexible?" "You're being dramatic." "I'm being honest," I said calmly. "Something your family could try sometime." Her jaw tightened. She stood without another word. A week later, Carol ambushed me in the grocery store. I was reaching for milk when she appeared beside me, smile fixed, eyes assessing. "Emilia," she said brightly, "I'm glad I ran into you." "I'm sure." "I'm worried about Nathan," she continued. "He's been miserable since your little disagreement." "We didn't disagree," I said. "He told you I was temporary. I took him at his word." "That was just family conversation," she waved it off. "You understand how these things work." "I understand that your son told you he was settling for me," I replied. "Very clear communication." "You're being stubborn," she said, lips thinning. "If someone said that about you while you were sitting at the table," I asked, "what would you do?" She hesitated. "I'd consider the context." "The context," I said quietly, "was your approval." She huffed and walked away. I finished my shopping in peace. Silence isn't avoidance. Sometimes it's the clearest answer you'll ever give. 4 months passed. Not the dramatic kind where time crawls and every song hurts, just real, steady days, stacking on top of each other until the sharpest edges of grief dulled into something manageable. I didn't track Nathan's life. I didn't ask mutual friends for updates. I let the silence do its work. Eventually, I started dating again. That's how I met Samuel Carter. Sam was a high school history teacher with an easy laugh and a habit of asking questions that made you feel like the answer mattered. On our first date, when I told him I managed construction projects, he didn't flinch or joke or ask when I planned to do something else. He said, "That sounds intense. What's the hardest part?" It felt revolutionary. We'd been seeing each other about 6 weeks when my phone buzzed during a coffee break at work. It was Mark, an old friend of Nathan's who'd always been kind to me in a distant, neutral way. "You sitting down?" he asked. "I'm standing on a job site. Why?" "Remember Nathan's sister?" I closed my eyes briefly. "Jessica." "Yeah, her marriage is imploding." I nearly laughed, not out of joy, but disbelief. "What?" "Richard's been cheating," Mark said, "for months, with one of the nurses at his hospital." The words felt surreal, like hearing that gravity had taken the day off. "How did she find out?" "The nurse's boyfriend found their messages. Sent screenshots. Guess he got tired of being the extra person in a very crowded relationship." I leaned against a steel beam, processing. The golden marriage. The standard Carol held up like scripture. Shattered. "It's real," Mark added quickly. "Jessica's staying with friends. Can't deal with her parents right now. After we hung up, I stared out at the site, the cranes moving slowly against the sky. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no triumph. Just clarity. 2 weeks later, Mark called again. They're getting divorced, he said, and it's ugly. Define ugly. Turns out Richard's lifestyle was smoke and mirrors, fancy car payments, trips they couldn't afford, credit cards maxed out to maintain the image. Jessica had no idea. The doctor salary, the BMW, the pedestal, all financed by illusion. And Nathan? I asked, surprised by my own curiosity. He's been asking if you're dating, if you seem happy. I smiled faintly. And what do people say? That you're doing great, Mark replied, and that you've moved on. That night, Sam and I sat on my porch, sharing takeout, the city humming softly around us. He listened as I told him, briefly, about my past. No names, no dramatics. You didn't overreact, he said when I finished. You responded. It felt like validation I hadn't realized I needed. Meanwhile, reality caught up with the Miller family. Jessica eventually moved back in with Carol. Temporarily, she told friends, while she figured things out. Carol, once loud with opinions, grew noticeably quieter. No more sermons about ambition. No more gold standard speeches. And somewhere in that silence, Nathan began to regret not speaking when it mattered. But regret, I was learning, has terrible timing. It happened on a Saturday morning. The kind of morning that feels protected, sunlight filtering through the blinds, coffee halfway brewed, no plans except rest. I was barefoot, still in pajamas when the knock came. I knew who it was before I opened the door. Nathan stood on my porch holding a paper bag and 2 cups of coffee, shifting his weight like he'd practiced where to stand. His hair was neatly combed this time, intentional, prepared. I just need 10 minutes, he said quickly. Please. I didn't invite him in. He held up the bag. I brought breakfast, the bagels you like, from Miller's. I can buy my own bagels, I said. I know, Amelia, I've had 4 months to think about what I did, and I made the biggest mistake of my life. I leaned against the doorframe. Which mistake was that? Saying what I said at dinner, he replied instantly, letting my mom pressure me into saying something horrible about you. You didn't let her, I said. You agreed with her. He flinched. I was panicking, he said. Mom was doing her usual Jessica and Richard show, and I said something stupid to make it stop. So you hurt me to make yourself comfortable. He swallowed. Yes. That was new. Honest, at least. I've spent 4 months realizing what I lost, he continued. You were the best thing in my life, and I destroyed it for my mother's approval. I studied him. He looked tired, worn down, afraid. Nathan, I said quietly, the best thing in your life wouldn't be someone you thought would do for now. I never thought that, he insisted. I never believed it. You said it in front of your entire family. He rubbed his eyes. I said something horrible when I was cornered. You said something revealing when you thought it was safe, I replied. He hesitated, then added, You must have heard about Jessica and Richard. I did. Doesn't that change anything? He asked. Doesn't it prove my mom was wrong? That the doctor wasn't so perfect? I felt something settle into place then. I never needed Richard to fail to know I was worth something, I said. The fact that you did tells me everything. That's not fair, he whispered. Life isn't fair, I replied. Sometimes people you think are temporary decide you're not worth their time. Tears filled his eyes. I love you. No, I said gently. You love the idea of me now that your family's gold standard collapsed. That's not true. You spent 14 months with me and still thought you could do better, I said. Richard's problems don't change that. He stood there silent, the bagels cooling in his hands. I know I don't deserve another chance, he said finally. You're right, I replied. You don't. I closed the door. I stood there for a moment, hand still on the handle, heart aching, but not wavering. Some doors close loudly, others close because there's nothing left to say. 6 weeks passed after Nathan's Saturday morning ambush. Long enough for the house to feel like mine again. Long enough for the last of the tension to drain from my shoulders. Long enough to know that closing the door hadn't been an act of cruelty. It had been an act of completion. I didn't hear from him again, which in its own quiet way told me everything I needed to know. Jessica's divorce finalized not long after. Word traveled the same way it always does, through mutual acquaintances, half-whispered updates, careful omissions. Dr. Richard Hale hadn't just been unfaithful, he'd been irresponsible in ways that couldn't be spun or forgiven. Jessica kept the house. The house was buried under debt. She moved back in with Carol temporarily, a word that now seemed to follow women in that family the way shadows follow light. Carol, once so generous with advice, grew noticeably restrained. No more comparisons, no more commentary on careers, No more sermons about marrying the right kind of man. Funny how the collapse of your perfect example humbles even the loudest voices. Nathan, I later heard, finally set boundaries with his mother, told her to stop commenting on his relationships, stopped entertaining comparisons. Growth, perhaps. Just late. As for me, life continued, steadily, intentionally. Sam and I took things slow, not because we were afraid, but because there was no rush to prove anything. He never compared himself to anyone else, never asked where he ranked. When people asked about him, I talked about how he listened, how he noticed things, how he made me laugh when work was heavy. When his friends asked about me, he said I was capable, grounded, someone he felt lucky to know. Revolutionary concept, apparently. Some people told me I should have given Nathan another chance, that he apologized, that people deserve grace. Here's the thing. He didn't apologize when it mattered. He apologized when the safety net vanished, when the example he measured himself against collapsed, when watching his sister's marriage implode scared him into realizing that maybe, just maybe, what he'd already had was enough. That isn't love. That's fear. I wasn't his first choice in confidence. I was his fallback in crisis, and I refused to be anyone's placeholder. Last I heard, Dr. Richard was renting a room from another divorced doctor and taking the bus to work. Turns out the gold standard came with student loans and terrible impulse control. Sometimes karma doesn't need drama. It doesn't announce itself. It just waits, quietly, patiently, for people to reveal who they are. And then it lets life do the rest.